in our yard.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at World of Pets podcast. We love having you here on a weekly basis. And, we want our pets to live as long as possible, but we want that to be a good quality life. So to that end, we on this podcast explore all things about pets and animals so that we can have them around for a long time, but they are living a quality life. So again, thank you for joining us. Take it away, hosts.
And welcome to World of Pets podcast. Once again, I am Peyton Pooh or David, joined by my co-host Anthony, and we have a repeat guest in here tonight, Genie. Looking so forward to this. But before that, I would just want to give credit to Debbie that you just saw for having her website, debspets.com, and all the things that you can find for pet and human wellness on that website. With that, Genie, I only have one question, so I'm going to let Anthony take off with this one.
All right. Go for it.
He's not ready for liftoff.
I wasn't. Well, yes, David, we have Genie back. I didn't know that was my cue to speak.
Yeah, that's you.
There's no producer here with cue cards, so I'm getting confused here as to what's going on. Genie, we were talking last week, and I want to have a little fun with you. A little bit. That's okay.
That's
fine. Do animals ever argue with you?
They do.
Really?
Yes. I have 2 donkeys with very strong opinions. And if I am late for dinner, and when I say late, I mean 5 minutes late, okay, I am going to hear it. And I'm going to hear it in 2 ways. I'm going to hear the bray. Yeah. And I'm going to have the feet kicking the metal panel along the edge of the fence, where they are definitely going to let me know I am not happy with dinner being 5 minutes late. You human, you have one thing you have to get right, and that's my food. So yes, they will let you know. Animals, I believe, this is my opinion, but I believe that animals have not only emotions and thoughts, but opinions, and sometimes very strong opinions, depending upon the issue. As you may know, in your public work as running for public office as a senator, that people have very strong opinions. Well, animals have some pretty strong opinions.
I was going to make a joke about it because you talked about donkeys having strong opinions. I mean, anyway,
we don't have to use the A word, but they do have strong opinions. They do have strong opinions. And not only donkeys, but, the more you are attuned to, I believe that animals are communicating all the time, right? It's just that we humans don't always know what they're saying and what they mean. But the fact is, once you start saying, you know what, animals are communicating, you start paying attention, more and more you notice they never stop communicating. They're always letting you know. And sometimes it's just a simple, I love you, or, I feel peaceful now. Sometimes it's a simple communication, but sometimes it's really complicated, especially when you get yourself a little pack of animals, and then you've got dynamics going on in the pack. You've got jealousies, you've got me first, you give me some more, there's lots of things that they have to say.
Now, I guess my question, to follow up my original question, and probably the most important question is, who wins the argument between you and the donkeys?
Well, it has to be a balance. It would not be a good thing to let them always win. That would mean that things would be out of control. And it would not be a good thing that I always win, because that would be a hierarchical relationship that really isn't, for those of us on the spiritual path, we're really interested in a oneness with all beings, and so that's going to mean, just like in any good, human relationship, sometimes your son wins the battle and sometimes you get to win the battle. And, it's not about winning every battle. It's about saying, okay, there are some things that I need to honor my donkey's wishes. And there's some things, like when they need their feet clean, they have to get their feet clean. They have to honor my wishes. My wish is to have their feet clean because it's healthier for them. It could be dangerous, unhealthy for donkeys not to have their feet clean. So, sometimes they have to do what I want, and sometimes I have to listen to what they want, and maybe I need to wait a minute. So I'm not going to just go run into their their area and just grab their foot. I'm going to spend a moment with them. I'm going to give them a brush or a pet and talk to them and say, okay, time to clean your feet. And that creates cooperation. Because they know that I'm not just in there to do something to them. I'm there because I want to help them, and they can feel my energy. They know when someone's coming in to help, and they also know if someone's a little scared of them and not too good at doing their feet, and they maybe put their foot down and won't cooperate. So, when we have good communication, relationships go well, and when we don't have good communication, relationships suffer. And I'm sure you see that in your public life. That when you yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I was going to say, I think that's key for any relationship, any aspect of life, whether it's a personal relationship with a significant other, whether it's a relationship with your children, a professional relationship, a public relationship. I try to teach my kids this fundamental thing, and it probably works with animals too. And that is, we don't have to agree. Once we figure out what we disagree upon, it's no longer about what we disagree upon. It's how we handle the disagreement. And so I think that that's important with the communication.
That's beautifully said. So sometimes my dogs are not going to win what they want. A treat, they could have a treat 24/7 if it was up to them, so I'm not going to win that one, but I'm going to enjoy recognizing that sometimes they want a treat and they think they deserve it. And sometimes they agree. I mean, a little bit of a softie, but I do know that sometimes I have to say, no, you just had one 5 minutes ago. You don't remember that? You just had a treat. So sometimes we have to draw those boundaries, so that's, I love the way you said it. It's that we don't always have to agree, but we have to respect the fact that I feel this way and you feel that way. We can work from there. We can figure out, okay, so you see it this way, I see it that way, but where's something we do agree on? You know what? We love dogs. Okay, we agree on that. You know what I mean? We might not agree on every issue, but do we love the animals? I think we do. So this is why animals can help us reach across the aisle and find some connection, common ground between all of us.
Debbie, she is our founder and our chief animal officer, our CAO.
Yeah.
She wants to know, is getting nails clipped a common thing that animals don't like? How do you deal with that?
That's a great question, Debbie. A lot of animals don't like getting their nails clipped, but it's not true that all animals don't like their getting nails clipped. And the issue is, how are we clipping their nails? So there's a way that we can do it that's more respectful. There's ways that we can do it that reduces fear. There's ways that we can do it that increases comfort. And that's what's important, is to understand, okay, maybe this isn't your favorite thing, getting your nails done, but I'm going to make sure that I'm calm when I do it. I'm going to make sure that I do it as gently and as quickly as possible. I'm going to get it done, promptly. And the animals feel that. They can tell if you're there to do it to them or if you're there to do it with them. In other words, if they feel like, you're doing this because their feet are going to be healthier, they're going to feel better, they're going to respond differently than if they think, you're just out there to do something to them. I mean, we don't want that. When we go to a doctor, we don't want them just come in the room and give us a shot without telling us what they're doing, So it's very important to say to the animal, okay, I'm going to clip your nails now. Is that okay? I'm going to be as quick and as gentle as possible, but I'm going to need to do this. And then afterwards, you're going to get a treat. And that becomes, okay, I'll cooperate. Yeah, doing it with them.
Yeah, it's really good, because that actually kind of leads into what I was going to ask you about. It's pretty specific. So I walk a lot. A lot of people walk their dogs. I don't have a dog anymore, unfortunately. But when I encounter people on the opposite side of there we go.
You flew away. Yeah.
Dang bananas. That's my.
Oh, that's what you were talking about. Yeah. Okay.
That's my bunny beard.
Yeah.
When I talk to, when I'm about 50, 60 yards away, I watch, especially single women or women that are maybe married. I don't know, but they have a big dog with them, and then they rope them in and they pull them back right against the edge of the door. Well, once I get within like 20 feet of them, I'm like, hi. Well, then I get the cackles on the back of my neck, and then the dog starts barking at me for no reason, right? Like I'm a dog lover. Like I'm trying to put out there, this is my energy. I love you as a person and as a dog.
Yeah.
But the other person has already reacted, and I think it goes from the person to the dog to me.
Exactly. It's exactly right. As the dog is feeling down the leash, that human who's pulled that dog in is sending a message, something is wrong, something is stressful, and then the dog sees you and thinks it's you and barks at you. When, really what it was her pre-fear. In other words, her
Yeah.
being afraid ahead of an incident based on a previous incident, or imagining a previous or imagining a future incident. And she's got this whole syndrome going, and she's sending this dog a message. This is a tense situation. We have to pull back, and the dog goes right on, rah, rah, rah,
Yeah.
and so it's not you. It's not you, David. Yeah.
I'm sure it's not, but no,
Yeah.
it's good to have a outside perspective on that, because that's happened a few times,
Mhm.
since I started walking, and I've noticed it mostly with women, not so much with men, and but their dogs, mostly bigger dogs. So yeah,
Mhm.
just a thought.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the human sets the tone for the dog that they share their life with. And if the human's saying, walking down the street feeling calm, like nothing bad's going to happen, chances are nothing bad is going to happen. And if the human's walking down the street and saying, oh my God, a strange man, a man with a beard, a big guy with a big beard,
God forbid.
all of a sudden, yeah. So
You gotta
they,
watch
they,
those guys with beards. Let me tell you
yeah,
something. about guys
really.
with beards.
I got two men with beards here I'm talking to in there. Yeah. So, okay. So yeah, but whatever their reasons is, they don't know you, whatever. And they get into their stress response, and instantly, if not sooner, I mean, the dog can smell it, feel it, taste it when their human goes into that stress response. So
Yeah.
even if the human hasn't yelled and screamed or something, it's still, they're feeling it, and they're going to react to that. So that's why it's so important when you're walking your dog to be calm, because then you're giving your dog a chance to enjoy their walk too. But if you're getting all into the, oh my God, something terrible is going to happen. Oh no, there's this standard poodle that's always a problem, and we're going to have a problem. And now the dog's like, we're gonna. So you're right. Now we're having a problem, but the human doesn't realize that they started it, not the dog. They started it by leading that energetic shift from we're on a walk, everything's fine, to, oh my God, something over here, we have to react. And that's that pattern that is very hard to change, because the human doesn't recognize that they're the ones who started it. And the dog gets blamed for being a bad dog because the dog's making a lot of noise or lunging or something. But as you said, when you described it, that human pulls their dog back. And if you were a dog, would you want to be pulled back? And I do this with the kids. When we have our high school program called Canines Teach Compassion, where we work with high school students, and we do an exercise where two kids are holding the leash. One person's pretending to be the dog and the other person's being the leash. But the person who's the dog, I make them close their eyes so they can really feel what the person is sort of communicating, not with words, but how their energy is as we walk sort of an obstacle course in the classroom. They're trying to lead the dog. And are they leading with gentleness and clarity, or are they kind of giving mixed signals? Are they, oh, here's a desk, we're going to bump. Oh, no, the dog can feel that. And so when the person plays a dog at the other end of the leash, they get to see what it's like to have a good leader. A good leader is someone who's calm and clear and has clear instructions, not left, right, left, right. That's confusing, right? If I tell you go left, right, you don't know what to do, right? You're going to get stressed. We all get stressed when we don't know what the instruction is, right? The dog wants to please you, but if the human is not giving a clear instruction to the dog's not going to get stressed and not know how to respond, and then quote unquote do bad behavior. So this is why so much, I'm a dog trainer, but so much of dog training is training the human. The dogs learn pretty fast. Yeah.
I agree with you, and I love that approach, because putting somebody, close your eyes, pretend you're a dog, and let somebody else lead you.
Yep.
Would lead you to be a better teacher in the end. Honestly,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
awesome.
It's
That's
so
a great
good.
strategy.
It's so good. I did this with veterinary students at the University of Arizona Veterinary Medicine School, and some of them loved this exercise and some of them hated it, because it really shows you who you are. When you're responsible for another being, and all of a sudden you realize your fears are going right down that leash, or your tension's going right down that leash, or your calmness is going right down that leash. So it's a pretty strong mirror to look at, because we all think we're good leaders, right? We're good leaders. We know how to lead, right? And usually we are. But if we are not present, we're talking on our phone while we're walking our dog, that's insane. Please don't talk on your phone when you're walking your dog, because that's not being present with your dog. And your dog is getting a mixed message. My person's not really here. So of course I have to protect him. Of course I have to be vigilant. My human's not paying attention.
Girl.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
Anthony's talking to a dog.
That's
right?
a whole other angle I didn't even think of.
Yeah.
Because you see so many people, whether it's headphones or listening to music or on a phone call, that are walking their dogs. Those are the ones that have the more barky dogs, if you will.
That's right. The
I
reactive
want
dog.
to ask you a multi-part question, if I can, Jeannie.
Yeah.
I'm sure this is probably something you get, but it's not a question, or it's probably a question you get. I don't know how often, and I don't mean anything by it, but the idea of communicating with animals is obviously not a mainstream idea. So my multi-part question is, what do you say to critics, people that are like critical of this, number one, and number two, is it more about body language, or is there actual like communication? In other words, are they able to physically audibly speak to you and you speak to them back? Is it, number three, an energy thing? So what do you say to your critics, and what do you teach? Because you talked about teaching the humans or training the humans. What do you teach humans about communication and beginning communication and how to do that?
I love that question. So let me see if I remember all the parts of it, but you can remind me if I forget. So number one is, I don't argue with anyone if they don't believe in the type of communication that I'm talking about, which is actually telepathic communication, where I can have complete conversations with animals, where I ask them questions, where they tell me information, where I tell them things that their person wants them to know. I have telepathic communication with animals. I don't hear words out loud. I hear them in my head or my heart. Okay. More likely in my heart. So I've learned how to open the channel that animals talk on, which is a very heart-based channel. And so it's not, animals don't usually talk the way you and I are talking, kind of they're much more direct, usually very simple, very clear. Animals don't usually lie about their emotions. If they love you, they love you. If they hate you, they hate you. If they're scared of you, they're scared of you. They don't love you and are scared of you. They, usually they have a purity in their communication. So it's a little bit different in some ways, but the way in which it's similar is that I can tune into an animal's point of view. I can ask an animal questions. I can say, tell me why you're barking, not stop barking yet. That's not going to work. If I say, eat your broccoli, you're not going to eat your broccoli. I need to know, okay, so how do you feel about this food you're eating? You know what I mean? I need to ask questions.
Yeah.
So as far as the critics are concerned, people who've had sessions with me, even if they weren't sure going in, they're pretty sure going out, because what they hear is like, oh my God, how could she know that? Like I was talking to, and this is over Zoom, because I do a lot of sessions over Zoom.
Yeah.
I was talking to a woman about her cat and some issues that she had. She had several cats, but the one cat we were working with, and I saw a tall black cat, like, those Egyptian statues, the Bastet, the guardian of cats, right? And I saw this image. And I was thinking, because the cat was not a black cat, I knew what the cat looked like. But I said, I'm seeing this image. And she said, just a minute. And she runs to her bedroom and she says, she shows me the statue that she has on her bedside table of the black cat, the Bastet cat. And so, that's pretty compelling, because I'm not in her house. I'm not in her bedroom. And yet I'm able to recognize the spirit of this particular being coming through to help this cat, which was a traumatized cat she had rescued. So this was this cat's guardian spirit. And, she knew she was drawn to have this statue by her bedside. And so when people, have these experiences of hearing something that really helps them understand their animal, the skepticism tends to dissolve. So I never fight the skepticism. I don't say, you have to believe me. I don't care if you don't believe me. It's whatever you believe, whatever you want to believe.
Yeah, it's not a mainstream idea. And a lot of people are taught that, it's impossible to communicate the way we do with animals, and so I'm sure that there is a lot of skepticism out there.
There is, but there's less. If you go back 50 years ago, there was a lot of skepticism. But if you go back 200 years ago or 1,000 years ago, every indigenous culture believed they could talk to animals. And they didn't, it wasn't just the children who could talk to animals. It was people as adults would talk to animals. So we kind of we go through cycles in history where we have this connection and it's easy and we understand we can talk to animals. And then the technology comes in or whatever comes in and all of a sudden we don't believe it again. But it's interesting because if you've heard of Dr. Gregory Burns, who's been doing fMRI studies with dogs that are awake, and they put the dogs into the MRI machines. And what they found is that dogs' emotions are literally like in the same place as humans are, like where we have fear or where we have curiosity or where we have joy. And they're seeing so much similarity between the human brain and the animal brain that is like ridiculous. It's like a ridiculous similarity. There's some differences, but there's tremendous amount of similarity in the way our brains process information, the way animals process information. So what it is for me, there's a channel that animals communicate on, a frequency that you might think of it as a radio station, like 98.6 is different from 89.2. They're just different stations and they have different broadcasts. But if you know how to tune your dial, you can, clearly hear the broadcast you're looking for. And it's the same thing with an animal. So when I'm sitting down to work with an animal, the first thing I need to do, I've already gotten the human's permission, but the first thing I do is see if the animal wants to talk. And usually they do, but sometimes they're like, what? Nobody's ever talked to me before. It takes them a moment, but generally they do want to talk. And so they have their preferences about what they want to talk about. The human says, why are they doing this and that and the other thing? And the animal says, I don't want to talk about that. Why don't you ask her why she's so stressed? I've had animals tell me, this one woman, this actually wasn't my story, but a friend of mine's story was another animal communicator. A dog was peeing in the potted plants that she had in the kitchen, little Chihuahua. She didn't like that. So she called an animal communicator and the animal communicator says, tell me about why you're peeing on the potted plants. And the animal said, because her husband is hitting her. And this was something that the animal communicator didn't know, hadn't been expressed, but the dog knew it. The dog knew it wasn't right. And the dog was trying to get her attention. And by, getting her to go to an animal communicator, she was able to realize, you know what, this is affecting the dog. So even though she hadn't been ready to leave that situation, when she saw how it was affecting the dog, she was out of there. She made the decision.
Then that's a good point, because I spent almost a decade working in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So I worked for the Federal Department of Justice, and there are actually criminal cases where animal psychics or psychologists or whatever were brought in to communicate basically as a witness on behalf of the animal as to what happened. Have you ever got to experience anything like that, even minutely in the legal realm?
I have not, but that's fascinating. Okay. I bet you've heard some fascinating stories. You have to tell me about them. We'll have to do another podcast and hear all about that. I'll tell you one story though. This was one of my teachers, James French, who does the trust technique. He's in England. He was one of my great animal communication teachers, and also Penelope Smith, who wonderful. She's been doing it for 50 years. But anyway, James was working with a woman who had a horse, and the woman believed in animal communication. So they had a session, and the woman said, well, I'd love you to work with my daughter and her horse because they're having some issues, but my daughter doesn't believe any of this. And he said to the daughter's horse, he said, before the daughter came in, he said, you better tell me something that only you and she know, otherwise she's never going to believe this. So the horse said, okay. He turned his head over here and he says, sometimes she's too tired to walk all the way back to the house, so she just pees in the corner over here. And so, James was like, oh my God, am I going to say this in front of her mother or say this? So, but the horse said it, so he says to the daughter, well, the horse said, sometimes instead of walking all the way back to the house, you go and you pee right in that corner. And he pointed to it. That was it. She was a total believer because nobody knew this. So
the horse ratted her out, man.
Yeah. Well, the horse had to break through the blindness. It was ratting her out, but it was also breaking down her barrier to understanding that the horse knew, because she was under the impression that she was trying to get the horse to do the things, blah, blah, blah. Like she was the smart one and the horse was the dumb one. And she needed to see that the horse was pretty darn smart. Yeah, it changed how she related to the horse, because she couldn't just do things and think that the horse didn't notice or didn't care or didn't see. The horse knew what was going on. And so it changed it changed their relationship. Things got a lot better after that. So it was a ratting out, but it was a revealing up. You know what I mean? It was a revealing in.
Yeah, that's man, just to get the perspective on how animals interact with other animals and people interact with animals, and how if we're not paying attention, we can miss some things, and
that's
then
right.
we can get bad behavior.
That's right.
It's interesting because the more that I hear and watch things on animals. Like, for example, whales, they talk about how whales, each like breed, I guess you could say, of whales, like humpbacks and blue whales and orcas and all these other types of breeds of whales, all have their own communication channels.
Right.
But even furthermore, within their families, they have their own dialects of these languages. So in other words, a humpback's language is different from a blue whale's language. But if you're in a humpback and you're in a specific family or pod, then your dialect of the humpback language could be different. Even though you can communicate with other humpback families, your family has its own dialect. So you know when you're around your family and stuff. It's
That's
just
right.
Interesting.
It's fascinating. I mean, it's the same thing with humans. I mean, if you go deep down south and you're not used to listening to a Southern accent, it might take your ear a little longer to really tune into that, or you're listening to a person from Brooklyn, or something, or Minnesota, Fargo, right? So that we humans have different sounds too. So yes, it's great that we recognize that now about animals. But in some cases, I don't know. Well, we only have 2 minutes, but remind me to tell you the jaguar story about. Yeah. I'll tell you really fast. Okay. So the scientist was in the jungle, I forget where, and he was learning to listen to the alert calls. And he found that these group of monkeys, these Diana monkeys, had one alert call for a leopard coming and a different alert call for an eagle coming, to warn each other about this. And so what happened was one day he was walking along at night. He was out too late, and he was hearing the alert call from the monkeys, and he realized that he was being tracked by the leopard. And so he was able to recognize it. But then other species also understood the alert calls of the Diana monkey, so they all would flee. But they would flee up from the leopard and down from the bird. You know what I mean? So they had these different alert calls. So yeah, differences in species, but also sometimes in some cases, different species being able to understand. I think we're out of time. It's been so great to be with you guys. It's been so much fun. Jeannie Joseph, the Human Animal Connection. You can go to my website and get some free gifts at thehumananimalconnection.org or read my book. Free gifts, lots of free gifts.
I like free stuff. Everybody likes free stuff.
Everybody likes free stuff. Thehumananimalconnection.org. We've got all kinds of free gifts. We got a free, if you want to make some homemade dog kibble, you can start making homemade dog kibble. We got other things. I forget all the things, all good stuff on the free site. Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Jeannie. We really appreciate you coming on 2 weeks in a row, putting up with me and David. I mean, there's not a lot of people that can tolerate us 2 times in a row.
Yeah, I get that idea, but it's maybe the beards they think are scratchy. I don't know. It's been fun.
I definitely want to thank you for being on again. We definitely have more things to talk about. I look forward to it in the future. Give us a quick, short comment about where people can find you and that sort of stuff.
Yes. So I'm Jeannie Joseph, the Executive Director of thehumananimalconnection.org. And we would love to hear from you. We have classes going on. We've got activities with the donkeys. We've got a class coming up on soothing touch for animals, learning 7 different techniques. So we'll just, get in touch, keep in touch. We're always looking for volunteers. And if you have a dog that you think would be a good therapy dog, we'll evaluate. We'll help the dog get trained. We'll bring them out. We worked with 911 operators yesterday. We went into the 911 operators and they were just so joyous. They were so happy to see us. This one guy got off the phone. He said, I don't know what I would have done after that call if Harry hadn't been here. So we just bring a lot of smiles and joy to the world.
That's the point, right?
Yeah.
So with that, we're going to close out with our sponsor, debspets.com. That's DEBSPETS.com. Anthony, take us away to our final closure.
As always, you guys are valuable. You matter to us. And if there's anything we can do for you, please let us know. We would be more than happy to do it. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Have a blessed night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. I'm glad that you joined us for At World of Pets podcast. We would like for you to take a look at what our sponsors have to offer, and that sponsor is debspets.com. You can access it through the QR code, or you can just go to the website. So thank you for joining us, and hope to see you again next week.